Hello and welcome to a special edition of Himalayan Echoes Calm. This is a digital edition of the really well-known festival. And I'm so honored again to speak to Nija Matuji. She's been a teacher to my mother, to my aunts. She's an institution in Kashmir and elsewhere, of course. She taught at the Government Women's College for the longest time, and she taught English and not just English. I think she taught all of them, all the women in my family and more, how to live, how to be independent, and um, how to be a good citizen of India and Kashmir. So I'm truly delighted. There's a wonderful new book that she's written, which is The Mystic and the Lyric, 4 Women Poets of Kashmir, which talks about Lal Ded, it talks about Arnimal, it talks about Rupa Bhavani, and it talks about Habakkuk. And we're going to talk to her at great length about this. I'm Kaveh Bamzai. As you can imagine, I am a Kashmiri Pandit like Neerja ji, and have heard so many stories about her through my youth and as I've grown older. I'm a journalist and an author as well. But Nija ji will always remain an ideal. So thank you so much, Nija ji, for joining us. And let's start by talking. Thank you. Let's start by talking about why you chose 4 women poets specifically from Kashmir. Why women poets?
First of all, because I'm a woman myself and I'm a Kashmiri woman, and I wanted the English-speaking world to know about the rich poetic treasures that have been left by these 4 women poets. Because people know about men poets.
Yeah.
Among these 4 ladies, only Lal Ded and Habakkuk are probably familiar names to people. But as far as the work of Rup Bhavani and Arnimal is concerned, that I don't think anybody beyond Kashmir knows. And even in that case, in Rupa Bhavani's case, very few people in Kashmir also know about her. That basically she was not only a saint, but she was a poet also.
Right.
So first of all, you see, I've heard the chants of Alvaks and Rup Bhavani's Vaks from my childhood onwards. Then I've also heard songs of Habba Khatun and Arnimal being sung by folk singers, by women at gatherings and things. But you see, there is a resonance which I carry from my childhood onwards. My father was also very fond of music, and we used to have sessions of Sufi music, Sufiana music. Great singers like Muhammad Abdullah Tibat Bakal, they used to sing in our place in a small gathering of aficionados. And even all the Sufi singers also would begin with a lal wak chant.
Right.
So it was there. And then once I started translating from Kashmiri into English, I did short stories, about 3 volumes of those. Then I thought that this is something I should do. I sort of thought that I owe a debt to the women of Kashmir. They have to be better known. And also I realized that the 2 main basic streams of Kashmiri poetry, poetic literature, the mystic stream and the lyrical romantic stream, the founders of these 2 streams were both women.
Yeah.
Lal Ded founded this mystic poetry idea, and till today her verses are recited at every occasion. They are relevant, absolutely. And the wonderful thing about Lal Ded's work is that she explains the abstruse, elusive, philosophy in the language of the common person.
Right.
She brought this whole idea of Kashmir Shaivism as practiced for centuries. She brought it out of the closets of Brahmanism into the common space. And everyone related to her because the metaphors she used were from ordinary life. In her work, she was acknowledging the work of artisans, laborers, craftsmen, And that is how it appealed to everyone. And yet, through these metaphors, she was explaining deep philosophy. So that was a great skill which she had. And I wanted everyone to know about it. And Rugbavani followed in her stream and she acknowledges Laldet as her guru. But the problem with Rugbavani is that her language is not easily accessible, as Laldet says, because it's a mixture of Sanskrit and Persian. Obviously, uh, some centuries have passed in between, and there have been other influences also. Laldet was 14th century, Rugbavani is 17th century.
Right.
And in between, the language has also undergone change. And also, Rugbavani doesn't make an effort to be understood by the common person.
Right.
She thinks that what she is talking about can only be understood by the initiated, by the people who are familiar with this language. So it was a struggle, but I wanted people to know what she was saying. So that was it. And the founder of the romantic lyrical stream is Habakkuk,
Yeah.
who's well known outside Kashmir also. She was the first, and she was from the 16th century.
Right.
And then it was followed by Ernimal. So basically, this was the urge that they should know. And also, I was so impressed by the kind of a proto-feminism in their works,
Right.
because the very fact of articulating, the very fact that they walked out of bad marriages, most of them, at least 1, 2, 3 of them.
Yeah.
But you see, one couldn't leave her marriage because she was in the 18th century,
Right.
where the social norms of Kashmiri Pandits were much stronger, and she probably was not as strong a person as Laldet was. This Arnimal I'm talking about. So I thought that their work should be acknowledged. It should be understood that in their own way they exerted a kind of an agency for feminism. Because you see, they don't make a secret of the way their husbands treat them.
Absolutely.
Habakkuk's mother-in-law, how she treats her. Arnimal's husband, how he neglects her, tortures her, even sort of engages in, what shall I say, kind of domestic violence kind of thing, because many of her verses talk of that. So unhesitatingly, they talk about the real situation of women in that particular time. And that, I think, is a very brave act.
Absolutely.
These are the reasons why I did it.
Yeah. And Nija ji, what struck me, and we've talked about this before, is the feminist element of in their work. Not element. I mean, it is them. Feminists.
First of all, because they are speaking as women.
Exactly.
They are not like George Eliot, that they are using a male name to publish their work.
Right.
They are proud of the fact that they are women, and they don't hide that at all. And also, you see, they do strike a blow against patriarchy.
Yeah.
In Laldat's case, her mother-in-law was like an instrument of patriarchy.
Yeah.
She tortured her. She didn't give her enough food to eat.
Yeah.
And this is something she also didn't make a secret of. She announced to the whole wide world that whether they cook a lamb or they cook a whole sheep, for me, there will only be the stone in the bowl of rice.
Yeah.
That story is very well known.
Yeah.
The mother-in-law used to serve her food, put a stone in her thali, and cover it with a thin layer of fish. So that people thought she was eating a lot, which she wasn't. She was not complaining. She would wash it, put it there. But one day when she was, provoked by her neighbors and the women at the river side where they had gone to fetch water, they said, "Oh, yesterday there was a huge feast in your place, so you must have eaten this and that and everything." At that time, she said, "Whether they kill a sheep or a lamb, for me, there is only that stone."
How heartbreaking is that, no? How heartbreaking that is that?
Obviously, it is. When you see that is actually how much these women suffered.
Suffered,
What kind of courage they had, Laldet, she walked out of her marital home. She walked about with unclothed. She didn't care for the opinion. In her verses, she constantly says whether they spit at me or whether they approve of me, it doesn't matter to me because I'm suffused with Shiva.
Right.
So nobody can touch me. Nobody can do me any harm. So this strength is something which is very striking.
Right.
We can all learn lessons from them.
Absolutely. Neerja, do you feel that the modern Kashmiri woman needs to reassess and sort of reclaim these women to understand their own heritage and to also give a new kind of feminism to India? Is it important?
What is important for us is to acknowledge that the women of Kashmir have never allowed themselves to be totally subjugated.
Right.
When 90 happened, when there was diktat that all women should wear a abaya and cover
Right.
their faces and everything, there were so many women who defied this diktat. I used to work in the college those days. Although most people succumbed out of fear because there was the fear of the gun. But you have to acknowledge the spirit and the courage of some women who refused to bow down to this diktat. And they continued to be the way they used to be dressed. Of course, they had to conform to a certain degree that covered their, hair. But otherwise, they refused to obey this kind of
Yeah, which brings me to my next question, Neerja ji, that Lal Ded and Habakkuk, all these poets are part of and Lal Ded especially, it's part of a common heritage. Whether you're a Hindu or a Muslim, you know Lal Ded in Kashmir.
Of
There's no
course, that is
right.
the best.
There's no religious divide here at all.
As far as Laldat herself was concerned, there was no religious divide.
Right.
Because you see, one of her famous verses is Shiv Chui Thali Thali Ravzan.
Right.
Mongzan Batat Musalman.
Right.
Trukai Chuk Panun Pan Praznao. Soy Chai Sahibas Zanzan. The Shiva is like the sun which shines on everyone. Don't distinguish therefore between a Kashmiri Pandit or a Muslim.
Right.
If you are wise, if you are really a kind of a person who has learned true philosophy, that if you can recognize your own self, that is your best knowledge.
Wonderful.
Don't talk about other, you have to recognize yourself. Panun pan prasna.
Prasna.
Recognize the reality of who you are.
Right.
And again, this Nundrishi, Sheikh Nuruddin Nurani, who is the patron saint of Kashmir, he followed her. But actually, there was a time when the two of them were together because the story goes that when he was born, he refused to suckle at his mother's breast.
That's right. Yeah.
And Naldet walked that way and she taunted him because she recognized his kind of spiritual greatness and sainthood. He said, if you were not ashamed to be born, why are you ashamed to suckle at your mother's breast? And thereby promptly he started doing it because in a way she was like a mother to him, giving him advice. And he in return has written a beautiful verse about Landet. Time Padman Porch Lale, Amrat Chow Gale Gale, Sosani Avatar Lale, Sui Var Medito Divo. That Landet of Padmanpur is the old name for Pampur, where she was born. She drank nectar sip by sip. She is our avatar.
Right.
She is for us an avatar, which you all know what avatar means.
Yeah.
And that is the boon I request God to give me, so that I could be like her.
Right.
So this reciprocity of recognizing each other's greatness. And also, you see, Laldet had discourses with this, who's known as Makdoum Sahab. You see, Kashmiri, not Makdoum Sahab, sorry, this Khanyar saint.
Right.
Sayyid, what's his name now? I've forgotten. Maybe one second. Anyway, they said that when she was walking around naked, so she saw this saint and she recognized that this is actually a person from whom I should feel a little need to clothe myself. So she jumped into a baker's tandoor.
Right.
And she came out, she was fully clothed.
Right.
This is the story about this thing. So you see, the Lalted has been acknowledged, and the first person who acknowledged her greatness was an Arabic scholar,
Right,
and he called her the second Rabia.
right,
Mhm.
right. So this is a heritage that everyone shares in Kashmir. You have
Ah,
been there for so many years, and and remarkably and bravely, and I pray to God you will continue to stay there. You have not left, despite so much that has happened in the valley in the last 30 years, which has been a terrible thing. But you feel that this is something that is slowly being eroded, or do you feel that we need to retain it, we need to reinterpret it, represent it to the world?
actually, it was being eroded. It had been eroded, particularly, you see, with modern education, when people stopped speaking Kashmiri also, they
Gee,
thought that there was no use for it. But now
right.
that they feel threatened in every way, even young people are going back to their heritage. Even young
Good.
people are interested in these women, not only these women, but in everything Kashmiri. Once
Right.
again,
Yeah.
people are writing about it, people are talking about it, there are discussions and little kind of gatherings where they want to
Right.
learn from one another. So that is very heartening. And
Right.
this Kashmir, no matter how much hard they may try, it will retain its integrity. I think
Right.
that is my hope.
Right.
It is my
Right.
hope.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And who would know that better than you? Although it sometimes seems so dark, and it seems such a black hole where there seems to be no hope.
There is, of course, I don't deny the existence of the black hole, but
Right.
people have learned to sort of cope. That is
Right.
their essential strength. They find ways and means of communicating with one another, trying to learn. In a way, this is a new learning, because you see, there is a whole generation of young people
Yeah.
who have not seen a Kashmiri Pandit. For
Exactly.
them, yes, also, you see, because the most Kashmiri Pandits have left.
Yeah.
But as far as I'm concerned, I never personally felt afraid or threatened or anything. Probably because of my friendships, which were old and lasting, and also because of my relationship with my students.
Yeah.
And even after they pass out, they do care for me.
Yeah.
So they
As
may
I
like.
know. Yeah. Yeah. But how can, especially Laldet, who is such a cementing bond between the two communities, without
Yeah.
politicizing her, how can we popularize her all over again, and not just to the new generation of Kashmiris who may not, who may be singing her, but they may not be aware that they're singing
Yes,
her song.
maybe.
It often happens. They sing her, but they're not aware of who it is. So what do we do to, apart from books like yours, which are very important in explaining this? What else can we do?
We must, first of all, I'm sorry to say, stop referring to her as Lalleshwari or Lalla Arif.
Right,
That is the
right,
first divisive thing. She's
right,
Laldet. Everyone calls her Laldet. So
right.
the way she died also, you see, nobody knows what happened to her body.
Yeah, right,
Muslims wanted to bury her, and Hindus wanted to cremate her, but she left both of them in ignorance of what she did, because she disappeared. And this is a similar story about
right.
Rambhavani also. Rambhavani also, you see, interacted with lots of
Hmm.
Sufi
Hmm.
philosophers, particularly one Shah Kalandar was there. And again, about her, they say that nothing could be found when she passed away. She passed away at the age of
Wow,
100, almost
wow.
100. And then they couldn't find anything except a lock of her hair.
Right.
So that is why she's also known as Alakeshwari, lady
Okay.
with alakas are hair.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
So
so the whole idea of, sort of communalizing these women, you can't have that, right?
no, this you can't communalize them, not at
Yeah,
all.
yeah,
Absolutely, they don't belong to a particular sect or anything.
yeah.
And in any case, this whole idea of Kashmir Shaivism It's such a kind of a Catholic philosophy,
Yeah.
so completely inclusive. It doesn't tell you what to eat or not to eat.
Yeah.
It tells you to live a normal, you see, life as a householder also. But you have to cultivate a degree of detachment. That is what these ladies did.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And Neerja ji, the other thing which we've talked about before, this whole idea that, oh, you know, the was unclothed is a metaphor. It is not. She was.
I don't think it's a metaphor at all.
Yeah.
No, she
Yeah.
was. She was because she didn't care two
Yeah.
hoots for the opinion of the world. And she had no use for fools. Had enough.
Okay. Now, the idea that she didn't suffer fools gladly, you know, there's so many other things that she says which you want to use in daily life, you know.
And people do. You see,
Yeah.
many of these things have become proverbs in Kashmiri. You
Right.
see, in this respect, she reminds me of Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Because exactly what Shakespeare did with the English language, how he enriched it, how he gave it all these new, turns of phrase which are used as proverbbs today. This
Right.
is exactly what she did. And Lalden's phrases are used all the time without
Yeah.
being conscious that we are using Lalden, but we are quoting her all the time.
Right. Right.
Our daily practices.
Let's talk a little about Habakkuk. Again, a very romanticized and a romantic, creature. No, how do you assess her?
You see, she's basically a woman in love. You have to
Right.
acknowledge that.
Okay.
And she's hankering after the absent lover.
Right.
And she's a woman who is sort of not ashamed of expressing her sexuality also, because she feels so proud of her looks and everything. She has all the qualities and she's proud of them because she talks about her beauty also. She talks about.
Right.
Yet there is no satisfaction unless somebody comes to enjoy that beauty.
Right.
And that is a very bold thing to do for a woman in that time. And also, she very much
now.
even now, it's very
Yeah.
difficult. But she talks happily about somebody who was following her, and then he
Yeah.
was looking at her from across the wall, then he was looking at her from a window across, all these romantic kind of images which you find in her. Unabashedly, she talks about this. No, nothing like that. And she also denounces her mother-in-law for treating her way. And she talks graphically how she grabbed her hair and she said that was for me worse than death, because she was an educated woman.
Right.
She had, and also she had great attributes. I mean, attributes great enough for the ruler of that time, Yusuf Shah Chak, to recognize and make her his consort.
Yeah.
And so she was beautiful. She could sing very well. In fact, the story is that Yusuf Shah Chak found her walking in the village, doing something, and then they had a kind of a poetic dialogue with each other.
Okay.
After that, he realized that she was not only beautiful but very, very intelligent and what should I say, a remarkable woman, and he married her. But then after he was taken away by Akbar, that old story, he just became more like a Sufi poet, in the sense that she would have dialogues with God.
Right.
Why are you punishing me like this and everything? She also evolved as a poet.
Right.
And I think that is a greatness in them.
What
And
about Anniman? Who's the least known of all of them, I think?
Known because, you see, her work was never published or anything. You see, Lalden's works were being collected. Right. And in Rupa Bhavani's case, Habakkuk survived through this oral tradition because people sang her songs. Now, Rupa Bhavani's father was also an exceptional person, I must say, because when she walked out of her husband's house, she had enough. of torture from a foolish husband and a wicked mother-in-law. The
Right.
father welcomed her. He didn't force her to go, "Jao beti, jahan se tumhari doli uthi, wahan arthi uthegi." Nothing like that song. He welcomed her, and not only that, her works were meticulously recorded by her family. That is how they are there completely.
Right. Yeah.
In Arnimal's case, nothing like that happened, but because the strength of her songs was such that they were sung by people.
Right.
And that is how they were collected and everything. You see, she was a traditional Kashmiri Pandit woman, married to this person who was ambitious and who was a scholar of Persian. And this was the rule of the Afghans in Kashmir at that time. During that time, she was there. And he was liked by the Afghan governor, and he liked him good enough, I mean, so much that he sent him to Kabul.
Right.
And he was in the Kabul court, and he wrote a long Persian treatise called Behre Tawil. His name was Bhavani Das Kachru.
Right.
But but he neglected his wife. And
Right.
she kept talking about how he is playing around with other women and how he has stolen my peace, my mind. And whenever he comes, how he steals my jewelry, pulls them off my armband and all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then also, they are beautiful songs, In fact, if you look at my book, I have the Kashmiri.
Yes, I know. It's so lovely.
It's not easy to read in Roman, but still. And
Yeah.
also, there are such beautiful images of flowers and
Yeah.
Kashmiri landscape and everything. And so that is. But now, because of her songs being known, she is also being recognized. Yes, otherwise there was a time when people thought that there was no such person as Rajnimal,
Right.
which is not true. And
So,
through
Neerja,
poetry, you can see that
Yeah.
she's having the imagery of a Kashmiri Pandit.
yeah, absolutely. All throughout, I've read them in detail. Neerja ji, I can't let you go without reciting something from Lal Del and telling our readers what it means, telling our viewers what it means.
Dam dam kurmas daman hale, prazilyom deep nanayam zat, andriyam prakash never chotum, gati rotum, this must have.
Right.
But slowly I pressed the blowpipe. Actually, this is an image from the blacksmith shop.
Right.
Slowly I did it, and what happened? A tremendous radiant light emerged.
Yeah.
And from the outer darkness, I was able to see myself. I stood revealed. And then I caught hold of Shiva and would not let him go.
Wow.
I pressed him because I myself was suffused with light.
With light,
and the image she takes is Dam Dam Kurmas Daman Hali. Daman Hal is which this blacksmith uses to, inflame his coals and things.
Wonderful. Wonderful. This is so wonderful. Thank you so much for being with us. And
if you have time, I'll cite another one which is so
please
relevant.
do, of course.
Talchui Zeus, the Perchuk Nazar, Vantamali can get a rotan chui. Sorry, Treviat Yetichi Gatun, Vantamali and Kitterotan chui. There is a pit, a cesspool at your feet, and you are dancing. I don't know how you can do it. And no matter how much you amass, you will have to leave it all behind. I don't know how you can even dare to taste your food.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
I think that should be a lesson to us all.
It should be to all of us. Thank you so much, Neerja ji. It's always such a privilege.
God bless you.
Talk to you. Please stay safe, and thank you so much for talking to us, and please keep writing. Thank you. Saga